So as you probably know, there are actually two accounts of the creation in the book of Genesis. One just sort of added on to the other, each with different kinds of meaning. And in the second account, the Lord God planted a garden in Eden. Those of you who are passionate gardeners will appreciate this vision of creation. The Lord God made to grow out of the ground all kinds of trees pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life also in the midst, and the garden and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And a river rose in Eden, watering the garden, separating into 4 branches. And there was gold and bdellium and onyx and lots of rivers. And the Lord God took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to till it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man thus, you can eat of every tree, but not of the tree of good and evil. So, if you are a gardener, you probably are quite happy being in the garden on your own, in solitude. And I imagine you don't have to take your phone with you into the garden, or you don't have to be checking your messages every 5 minutes. If you really love gardening, you're quite happy to be there for a couple of hours or so, enjoying it in solitude. But you wouldn't like to spend your whole life doing that, probably. So the Lord God said, "It is not good that man is alone. I will make him a helper like himself." So what does God make? He makes from the ground all the beasts of the field and birds of the air. And he brought them to the man to see. Look at this wonderful zoo I've created, this wonderful biodiversity. And not only do you have all these wonderful trees and plants, but you also have these wonderful animals. And some of you may have pets and have very strong emotional relationship to your pets. So you'll know that animals can be very nice. And he brought all of these to the man to see what he would call them. And the man called each of them by its name. So the man named all the cattle, all the birds of the air, and all the beasts of the field, but, big but, biblical but. It says, he found no helper like himself. So it's not enough for the human just to be in nature, however beautiful, however much you are a cultivator, however much you love it. It's not enough, and it's not enough just to be in harmony with the animal kingdom. However beautiful, however friendly the animals may be. And so, what the Lord God do? He cast the man, Adam, into a deep sleep, and while he slept, took one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib which the Lord God took from the man, he made into a woman and brought her to him. And the man said, "She now is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman." So, still pretty patriarchal, but somebody has to do the naming after all. So, and for this reason, a man leaves his father and mother and clings to his wife, and the two become one flesh. Both the man and his wife were naked, but they felt no shame. So this takes us, I think, a little closer to understanding what this loneliness question is about, what it means, not only psychologically or sociologically, important as those aspects are. They cause a lot of suffering in both of them. But the deeper significance is to be found, I think, in this story of creation. It's fundamental to human existence and to human nature. It's not just a modern phenomenon, and it's not just an individual experience, even though if it becomes extreme, as it does for many people in our kind of atomized society, it does feel extremely individual. So how then do we understand this element within the human being, within human nature itself, that longs and for and needs a companion, needs connection, needs a helper like ourselves. And that's what I hope we can say we have all the answers, but we can begin to explore something of that level of the question. When people do find themselves suffering, as even Adam did, although Adam didn't complain, but God could see that Adam was incomplete. He couldn't name, presumably he couldn't name his own condition, but God, the source of being, recognized it, and this knowledge arose from the deep sleep. And from that deep sleep, the deep unconscious, comes the capacity for relationship with people like ourselves. Not just with the trees, not just with the animal kingdom, but with other human beings. That we are unique in creation, in needing this and longing for this level of relationship. But when you're feeling lonely, you may well go in search of that, seeking what you feel you don't have, and seeking for it outside of oneself, seeking a relationship which is going to bring you happiness. It may be a romantic relationship, or it may be that you become highly successful and powerful and a celebrity, and everybody knows you and recognizes you on the street. So there are many ways in which we might seek relationship, or seek the happiness that we appear to have lost or appear to have missed. And there is, of course, a great danger in seeking happiness. Not just happiness outside of ourselves, but seeking happiness at all. Now that seems almost heretical in terms of modern ideas of fulfillment and meaning and rights. We have a right to happiness according to the Declaration of Independence, American Declaration of Independence, or the Declaration of American Independence. That there is we have a right to this happiness, and we have a right to seek it. Well, no one would deny that we have the right, but is it right that we should devote so much of ourselves to claiming that right. There are some rights we have, for example, the right to strike back if somebody hits you. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. The law would recognize that. The law, in every man-made law, would recognize that you had the right to respond in a proportionate way to a harm that is done to you. This became a big issue a few weeks ago on the day of when the American embassy opened in Jerusalem. And 50 or more people, I think, were killed a few miles away on the Palestinian demonstration. And many commentators said, was this proportionate? Of course, a country has the right to defend itself. And you might say the government has a duty to defend its people. But even then, in using that right, you still have to act in a proportionate way. But actually the gospel, and we'll see other wisdom traditions, say that these rights may not be the final measure of human meaning or human fulfillment. So in other words, we have the right to happiness, yes, of course, and we have the right to seek happiness, yes, but that may not be the best way, and certainly not the only way, to find what we are looking for. Just in the same way as the gospel tells us that it is a higher aspiration, or it's a higher goal, not to respond to violence with violence, even proportionately, but to turn the other cheek, to forgive 70 times, 7 times. You may say, I can't do it, but I would like to be able to do it. And maybe I'll start trying to get to that place in my humanity where I could do that naturally and with full consciousness of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So what we'll look at also then is other ways in which that longing, so deeply embedded in the human person for a helper like ourselves, for companionship, for relationship, how that longing can be fulfilled and is meant to be fulfilled and will be fulfilled without claiming it as a right and without devoting ourselves to seeking it outside of ourselves, as if it were something, some commodity that we as a human consumer can buy or achieve or possess. So that's what we'll look at a little more, and just as a little clue to what that involves, we'll take some advice from the Buddhist tradition, but also as a little clue to what it is. We'll end with this section from St. Matthew's Gospel, chapter 25. The section on the Last Judgment. And this Last Judgment idea has often been presented as some kind of rather terrifying, court of last appeal, and after which there's no more appeal for mercy. But I think it's meant to be read in a slightly different way from that. Rather, it's the Last Judgment in the sense that it's taking us into an understanding of the deepest truth, the deepest meaning. The last, not in the sense that you don't get another chance, but the last in the sense that this is the level at which you will find what you are looking for. Okay. So this, many of you will be familiar with this, so I won't read it all, but when the Son of Man shall come in his majesty, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory, and before him will be gathered all the nations. And he will separate them one from another as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And the king will say to those on his right hand, "Come, blessed of my Father, take possession of the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me to drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you covered me. Sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." And then the just will answer him, saying, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" And the king, answering, will say to them, "Amen, I say to you, as long as you did it for one of these, the least of my brethren, you did it for me."